Hi everyone, in this video we're going to go over generators in Substance Painter. Okay, to use generators are very powerful and they will allow us to add interesting effects and blend between materials in interesting ways. However, they require mesh maps, and by default, if you're importing a new mesh, it won't have maps, so we have to bake these maps before we can use them. So what kind of maps are we talking about? Probably the most important one for our purposes is curvature. So where does the object change direction? But also position is important, and there are other maps that could be useful. So we need to hit this little croissant icon here. And this will have the sort of normal mesh maps, or the typical mesh maps that you're going to want. And so we just bake all of these. Output size, let's make these a little higher. So let's say 20 by 48. And we can do it for both of our texture sets, that's fine. And all we have to do is select these and now hit bake selected textures. And this will be generating our maps. And then we'll be able to look at these maps once they're baked out. So I think we are almost there, still baking a little more information. And okay, great. Return to painting mode. Now we have our maps. We can look at our maps here, like for example, our mesh maps. If we scroll down, the one that we're most interested in would say be the curvature. And this is, as you can see, that showing us like on the edges where we have information, curvature information. We can also look at the position, and so this is just giving our mesh a color in different parts of the mesh, and we can use that actually to blend between colors. So let's go ahead and just go back to material and show how we can now use this information now that we've baked it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull over a material that we made in Substance Sampler. Let's change it to triplanar projection. Let's change the tiling, bring that down a little bit. That looks good. I'm now going to just duplicate this. Let's see, duplicate layers. And then because this is a texture that we made that has parameters, I'm going to just find a different color variation for this. Something maybe up here. That looks like something that would be like a contrast to it. Yeah, we'll just leave it like that for now. And then maybe with our, let's see, is that all we want to do for now? That's all we want. Well, that's all we want to do. But now let's blend between these things using a generator. So how would we do that? There are many different generators, but let's first add a black mask. Then that goes away, right? And so we know already that we could paint that information back, or be using a regular brush or particle brush. We can now also add a generator. So let's add a generator. And the generator we want is a mask editor, I believe. So there's some pre-made things. And let's see, with this, you can see a little bit of change if we turn this on, like here, right? We're seeing some change. And so what's happening here? We are using different, let's see. Okay, we're using these different things, and somewhere we have what is actually a curvature. So curvature opacity. So I think that's the primary one that we are actually working with here. So if we increase the curvature opacity, you can see that it's creating more, we're blending at the curvature this in this other color, right? So you can kind of see that here. Now, one thing that's happening is because we're adding height information, it's getting a little distorted. So it should have the same amount, the same height information, because it's the same texture. So I think we're going to come back to the texture itself and go to height. And then let's go ahead and just get rid of that height information. So now what we're doing is just put this thing here. Alt, cool. All right, great. If I can find this texture, great. Now we're just blending this texture in. So let's go back to the mask editor, which is our generator, and you can see here that we have curvature, and we can kind of work with that curvature. We could also do the position gradient. So let's take away curvature and look at our position gradient, and I think also in our mask, global invert. So yeah, we go back to our curvature. This is worth noting. Let's say we wanted to switch these things. We could invert that, right? And now we're getting the green thing happening over the over there. We could also use some sort of texture, I believe, to kind of change this. So our image texture, if we go to our textures, and let's look for grunge. And we could give more variety along these edges just by using a texture. And we want to make sure then that texture is, let's see, the contrast, the balance. Not seeing a huge difference there. Tiling amount. Huh. Not sure why that is contrast. Huh. All right, well, scratch that one. I know it's possible, so I'll have to look into that one more. Okay, oh, that's why, because the texture opacity was down. So let's just bring that back, texture, so bring that, and then the texture opacity should be higher. So that, okay, it is doing something, because I can see a little bit of a change. So texture, attributes for the texture, how that texture, contrast, tiling amount, we can use the tiling, rotate it. So I'm not sure, this contrast invert false. Okay, that's for the whole thing. All right, so perhaps if you played around with this texture, maybe if we used a different kind of texture, we would get something more dramatic there. All right, I'm going to go back into the global invert, switch that back, and so so now we're using that kind of curvature information. So let's get rid of the curvature info, and one more thing here with this texture: scale, blending mode, overlay, brightness, triplanar. I think that, yeah. So here we could control the texture to get a little bit more control. So I'm not going to play with that right now. Let's go back to curvature. Let's take this down, and then let's look at the position gradient. So the position gradient, that is more of like a blend. It looks like we're going maybe more from top to bottom, and we can invert it. So that's pretty useful. The balance, we can see here that like by changing the balance, we're changing how much that it's transitioning from one to the other. So this is working pretty well. And yes, here, so it's telling us that we're going from top to bottom, and we could actually then sort of, make that go diagonal by blending in also right to left. We could get rid of top to bottom, and then we could do right to left. And we could probably invert this, right? So we wanted it going from one side to another. So this is another quick way to blend between textures. I showed you how to do this in Photoshop, but you can do it in Substance Painter as well using generators. But we do have to have maps for the generators to work. So you have to go through this baking process. And now that we have this set up, now we're kind of using the position gradient. We could also then choose to bring back some curvature, and that would bring back more of that information everywhere, I guess. Up here, the curvature was bringing back in that blue up here. So Okay, so there's that, and then obviously you could use really different textures. This one is a, just two different versions of the same texture. The other thing we could do, I suppose, is that they're being projected in, they're at the same scale, they're in exactly the same location. So I don't know if we changed the rotation, for example, of one, that it's not, I think, very appealing. It's kind of nice to have them lined up, I think. Maybe if we change the tiling of one versus the other. I mean, you can play with these things and see if you get interesting results, but this is kind of nice, just switching between these things. Maybe if this was very different, like, I don't know, like a much bigger thing down here with our, maybe there's a hardness to the transition that we would want to work with in the projection. So let me just go and see if that's the case. If we go back to the position gradient, we could come back here and position gradient and the balance, the contrast. Maybe if we change the contrast, that's working right. Okay, the contrast is giving us a really sharp line here. And so we can now extend that area of blend and the balance. We can kind of work where that's happening. And that gives us, I think, a better result if we were going to misalign the textures. So I like, I don't need to play with the brightness, but the contrast is giving us, that's going pretty well, like that. That's good, I think, something like that. Now we're transitioning from one thing to another, and then of course we could hop back over to iRay and think about, rendering, like what would be a good view to render this. So that is how you can use generators. Thanks for watching.